I started running away from home. I got involved in a lot of drug activity. I went to parties where there was drugs, alcohol, and sex. I was raped at least twice because I was hitchhiking to get to Fresno, back to my friend Gracie's house. I had guns stuck to my head. Threats were made to me that they were going to kill me if I told anybody what they had done to me. Of course, I begged for my life and didn't tell anybody. All those times that I was on the run, here I was. Me and my friends, we would come here. We would go into this bar. At that time, I was only 11 years old.
Surfer.
And I was in this bar. We would sit at the chairs. The waitresses would bring beer. Men would come and sit with us and pay for the beer. They'd take us out to drink. Maybe 5 minutes to 10 minutes before closing time, we would get up and go out, walk out. And my friend Gracie had a lot of friends who had cars. So we would hop into their cars and they'd take us to her house. There were other times that I didn't have anybody with me, so I had nowhere to go. I didn't know people like she did. Either I would sleep in there, in the bar. The owner would hand me a pillow and say, "Don't open the door for anybody, and I'll be here in the morning." And he'd come, open the door, and let me out. There were other times that I slept right there. Or I slept in strangers' beds. Like these men, there were a few. I just go to their house and sleep there. I remember one night there was a man that drove us to this particular house where the men slept in the basement. Took us down there, we slept there overnight. Of course, we couldn't stay unless we had sex, so we had sex with strangers.
This year, says the FBI, 1 million children will run away from home. That's double the number that ran away in 1969, the time of the Woodstock generation. Back then, the runaways were mostly from middle or upper middle class homes, rejecting the values of their parents for drugs, adventure, or just dropping out. Today's runaways are not the same. They're not hippies, and from what we learned, few of them are on dope. Mostly they seem to be children of broken homes, or homes feeling the pinch of the recession. 60 Minutes spent a week at a center for runaways learning what's on their minds. Here's Mike Wallace.
But sooner or later, most runaways are picked up by the police. Terry, 12 years old, is a chronic runaway. His father's dead. 2 years ago, his mother abandoned him. Terry is what they call a throwaway, a kid nobody wants.
The first time I ran away, I was about 10, something like that. Got kind of cold, so I had to go back home.
I got a daughter. She's a runaway. She's 15 years old. That's her. Have you seen her? I've never seen her.
2 days and 2 nights with a lost generation of American children, hustling and hurting in our parks and on our sidewalks.
Well, we start about 10 o'clock every night, and basically we're out looking for kids. A large percentage of kids on the street run from homes that were abusive, sometimes sexual abuse, and they turn to the streets thinking that they're going to find something better. They may discover very quickly that that's not true, and that translates also into a juvenile prostitution problem.
One day, I was at home and I had just gotten home from school. I went into my bedroom and I put my books down. I hear a loud screeching sound from a car. And I looked out the window, there's my brother. He's going across the street, he's parking. He's going up to the door, he's knocking on it. The father answers the door. I don't know what they're talking about, but the father closed the door. He did a very fast U-turn, so fast you could hear rubber burning on the ground. He comes up to the front of my house, he parks, he goes in the house, comes into the bedroom, and he rapes me. Can I take a minute? I can do this, thank you, Jesus. This was the brother that I trusted. I really trusted him. I trusted him with my life. I mean, he had been so good to me as a child. He wasn't one of the child molesters. So yeah, that devastated me. To the point, I don't know what happened to me, what came over me after that. It's like a deep state of depression. I felt like I was in a trance at times. Some days I felt like something was really wrong with me. I would shake a lot, and I would forget things, and I would black out. I wasn't on drugs, but I was blacking out. I recall talking to a neighbor, but I don't know what she's saying. It was like I totally blacked out. And it was like when I woke up, I could hear myself talking, but I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know what we're talking about. Yeah, that was just, I just think that something very, what is it called, mentally was going on with me. I was continuing to run away. At this time, I began cutting myself. I always wore long sleeve blouses and pants because I didn't want anyone to see all the cuts that I had on me. I hated myself so much that I just wished I was dead. At this point, I hadn't tried committing suicide yet, but I was doing a lot of cutting. After running away and getting more involved in drugs and alcohol and parties, I would spend my time right here in this area. I would stand at the gas station that's just down the street from here. Johns would come up, offer me money for sex, and we would walk to this location right here. These three doors I see here, I know one of them had a man that would be sitting outside the door, and the Johns would give him money, and we would be able to go in. All that I can remember was a small table and a bed, and that's where we had sex. And then he would hand me $20, $30, whatever I told him they had to pay. That's what they paid. And I would use that money, and me and my friends, we would go to different areas, different locations of Fresno, and we would buy drugs, and we would get high. The cheapest drug that I've ever done is sniffing paint. It started by spraying the rag, folding it up, breathing it in until I was high. I remember one time, me and my friend went to some other friend's house in Calawa, and we were doing that. We were getting high on paint. I started hallucinating. I was thinking that my friends were going to jump me. So I started running out to the street. My friends went after me, grabbed me, pulled me back within inches of me being hit by a car. That's what drugs was doing to me. And the devil was using those drugs to try to destroy my life. My mom, she moved to Rose Avenue. Rose Avenue is just like east of Carruthers, and it was pretty close to Chestnut Avenue. There was a little elementary school there called Monroe Elementary School, and I went to that school. I did 8th grade there. I ended up going back to Juvenile Hall. I remember being in front of the judge, and the judge was reading my history, and he told me, I can see here that you have a long history of running away from home, and you've been in Juvenile Hall quite a bit of times. He said, but I'm noticing here that you've only been in Juvenile Hall. Every time you come, you've only been in Juvenile Hall for maybe a day or two. I'm going to put in an order that you are in our Juvenile Hall facility for 2 months. When I got out, I went right back to doing the same old stuff. Then I met Robert Garcia at a bar that was on the west side, and we started talking. Actually, he was the youngest man that I met so far while I was out doing what I was doing. He said he was 19 years old, but he looked older than that, and I was 15. We started dating, going out. He would tell me, make sure you're at home when I come. I didn't want to be at home. I wanted to be off having fun and partying. One day when he showed up, I wasn't home. The next time I saw him, he said, if you're not here the next time I come, I'm going back to Texas where I came from. He was only here in Fresno because he was doing agricultural work, a farm laborer, and he lived in a camp. I was like, okay, but I didn't listen. I took off again. When he came, I wasn't there. So about 4 months later, I was pregnant. I hitchhiked to where his house was, where I knew he had been living, to let him know. He was already gone. He was in Texas. To this day, he doesn't know that he even has a daughter. I started staying home, forcing myself to stay home. I stopped doing the drugs and I was drinking a little, but not that much. When it came time for me to have my baby, I went to have, and I had her. I brought her home.
How old were you at this time?
I was 15. No, 16. I had just turned 16. About a month before she was born, I turned 16. I stayed home for a while, not very long. And I would notice that my mom was paying very special attention to her. She was showing her so much love. But I remember the feeling of jealousy. And I remember thinking to myself, how come she never showed me love like that? So there I was once again feeling like I was the lowest of the low, that I wasn't good enough. Other people were, my daughter was, but I was never good enough for my mom. So I started taking off again. I started running away again, getting involved in drugs and alcohol. At that time, I was on welfare, just like my mother. Like they say, mother like daughter. Just like my mother, when she would get her welfare check, she would take off to the bars, and we would be hungry. I was doing the same exact thing. I would get my check. I gave my mom a little bit to take care of my daughter, but the majority of it went to the drugs. I was doing drugs. I was running these streets. I was getting into trouble. I was doing a lot of, crazy stuff. People trying to kill me, watching friends die. Like I was at a party one time. I had a friend who was about 8 months pregnant. She was getting high. We found her in the bathroom, dead, in a pool of blood on the floor. These were the things that I saw. These were the things that I went through as a child. And so many things that I know that could have been prevented, wasn't being prevented. No, in my mind, nobody cared, and I didn't care. It didn't bother me if I died.